Hello, in this video I speak with John Hibberd about Section 2 of Mission Action Planning. That's prayer and worship. So John, we're thinking about prayer and worship. If a church says, oh, I think, we're at stage 1 and we want to move to stage 2 in this section, what might they need to do?
I think this is about making prayer and worship a priority. And that might sound a strange thing to say, because churches will say, well, that's what we do. Every week we meet and we worship and pray. But for some people in the church, that's be all that they do.
Okay.
That they don't have any other engagement between those times. And also for some of them, maybe the level of active engagement is relatively low.
Making prayer and worship a priority, what might that look like in practice?
In our diocesan strategy, we talk about developing a real dependence on prayer, or a dependence on God in prayer, really. So some simple ways you can do that, for example, when you're going to worship together, those who are leading, do they pray together before they start, or do they just go straight in? I think that can make a difference. When you have meetings, is prayer on the agenda at all? Is it just something very brief, or is there a little bit of time given to really pray about the things we're going to discuss? And then one other example might be in terms of leading intercessions. Do we encourage congregation members to do that? Because they will almost certainly develop in their prayer lives as they do so. So just some simple ways of making prayer a greater priority in what we do.
So John, if a church is at stage 2 and they want to move to stage 3, what might they need to do?
The word I think that characterises this transition is diversity. It's about offering a greater variety of things.
Okay, so what might that look like in practice?
Well, this time I'll take worship as an example. One of the things that Mission Action Planning says is that we want to have worship which really helps people to engage in an inspiring way with God. In quite a few churches, this means churches have an experience of worship which is fairly much the same each week and which nourishes the people that go. But let's take, for example, that might be quite a traditional form of service. And then you find that churches say, well, we would love to see more children and young people come and join us. But you have to ask the question, well, would they find this as nourishing, or would they need something different? So if I give a concrete example from way back in my curacy, really, the rector took a brave decision in a church that was used to quite a rich Eucharistic tradition to launch a once a month all-age service as an experiment, he said, first of all. This was not universally appreciated. Some people would much prefer that we stayed as we were, but the reality was that we saw more people at that service, and we saw young families, and particularly baptism inquiry families, beginning to engage creatively with worship. So it did make a difference, but it did come at a bit of a cost. Now, this would not be necessarily the solution for your church, but it's thinking about, well, what's the equivalent for us? Might it mean meeting at a different time of the week? Might it mean doing something like a messy church? Might it mean meeting in another venue, maybe somewhere nearer a school or something like that? So that's just an example of how we might create a greater diversity of worship to meet a wider variety of people in our community. And someone like Mike North, who's Youth and Children's Advisor, for the example that I've given, would be very helpful.
It sounds to me, John, like if a church wants to move from stage 3 to stage 4 in this section, then they need to make sure that they've got a really strong culture of prayer and worship in their church. Is that right?
Yes, I think culture is a very good word. Probably the only other word I would use would be depth. Right. We often talk about numerical growth. I think that's really important because individuals matter to God. But the other form of growth is about growing closer to God, actually going deeper in our Christian lives, and prayer and worship are obviously integral to that.
Okay, so can you give me some examples about examples as to how you might establish this kind of culture?
So this could be at the individual level, first of all. So, for example, a person might join a prayer chain where they can pray for confidential needs that are known in the church on an urgent basis, or meet with one or two others in a prayer triplet. They might join our 2025 prayer community that enables them to get some things that will help them to grow each week, and some prayer requests, and to be part of that bigger virtual body. And some might engage, for example, in prayer ministry and praying for people for healing, whether after services or at other times. Alongside the individual, it's thinking about, well, how as a church can we grow deeper in prayer? One really easy way to do that, I think, is to engage creatively with Thy Kingdom Come, those 10 days of prayer between Ascension and Pentecost. There's always a lot of materials produced, and that can be a really good focus to take us into the rest of the year. Other ways might include then hosting events in our mission area or deanery, or perhaps putting on a prayer course to help people develop in their prayer lives. But all of these would show us developing a much more serious commitment to prayer and a culture of it within our churches.
A sort of culture that sort of infuses every part of church life.
Yeah.
I see. So thank you for those ideas. It sounds like to me that first of all, churches must make sure that prayer and worship is their priority.
Yeah.
Then they need to think carefully about the diversity of the things that they offer, whether they're meeting the needs of everybody in their community. And then they need to make sure that they've got a really strong culture of prayer and worship established in their church.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.